So welcome back, everybody. We're in the middle of chapter 35. We continue, Be'ezus Hashem, this chapter, which is a very fundamental chapter. Interesting when we say fundamental chapter. I could really say it in every single Pedic in Tanya. But and I would add, this happens to be a unique Pedic because it answers a very fundamental question, which we all ask ourselves, and those that ever makes it clear, because essentially, especially in the world of the Beinani, that he could naturally, as a result of his struggles and his challenges, demonstrate demonstrate disappointment, and lament on his struggles, in a way questioning, like, what's the point? What did I come down to this world for if I'm never able to transform my Yetzer Hara? Similarly to Tzaddik, we said, especially the Tzaddik Gomer, which completely transforms his Yetzer Hara and becomes a complete ally with the Yetzer Tov, meaning to say that it doesn't have any struggles, as the Tzaddik doesn't have the average struggles the average person, which is again in the Beinani as an example, has. So the question is, what's the point after living so many years, decade after decade, with the same kind of challenges and wars, if you will, struggles and so on? So the Alter Rebbe answers this question by demonstrating in this very chapter that in the end of the day, there is that absolute connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which comes precisely as a neshama lives down here in this physical world, and is able to be mekayim, is able to complete the Torah mitzvahs, dafka, the way the Torah mitzvahs is given down here in this very world. So despite on the way or throughout there are these constant challenges which puzzle the mind and disturb, to a great extent, tantalize and disturb, yet ultimately, if you look at the schedule, or you look at the Yid's investment on a daily basis in his Avodas Hashem, ultimately he's learning, because of, again, which is associated with learning Torah, which is learning Torah, doing mitzvahs, davening, and so on. So as such, it is all worth it, the neshama, to come down to learn Torah and to do the mitzvahs, because only via learning Torah and doing mitzvahs is a Yid able to truly connect to Hashem, truly to connect to his Creator. And prior to that, the neshama is experiencing Gan Eden, even though it's all holy, lofty, an exalting experience, a divine experience, or the spirit. It's a divine spirit which the experience is totally overwhelmed with the divine spirit which exists in Gan Eden, which is naturally a divine experience, experiencing true the true sense and divinity, the true energy of the divine, and appreciating it in Gan Eden, even to an extent even more than the neshama would appreciate that in this world, because of the hell of Hester, the obscurity which exists from of the Beirei of the Creator within this very world, which means that it's not Chas v'Shalom, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is different in this world, or not Chas v'Shalom, this world is essentially different than any Elam Elyon. It's the same God which continues to create the Olam Elyon, creates this physical world as well. Yet, this physical world, there's the concealment, there's a cheshech, there's an obscurity which exists on the very reality of the chayis, of the vitality and life force, which is again the godly life force, the godly vitality coming from Hashem Echad, which continues to vitalize every moment and every second. Every moment HaKadosh Baruch Hu continues to pump energy, hence there's no independent energy, Elam Hazeh is a direct result, or it's Etzem Etzias, which means it's mere, the physicality itself of Elam Hazeh is only because of the chayis, the godly energy which continues to vitalize it, yet in the same token, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created this world, this Eilam, that the Eilam is Mailam Mastir, for that matter. The world is from the Lashon Helam. Eilam is from Lashon Helam Behester. It conceals over the very reality which continues to vitalize it. So this is the challenges that the Neshama has in this world. So it has less of the experience, less of the appreciation of Elokus and godliness in comparison to the way it was before, prior coming down to this world. But yet, precisely in this world, and that's where Kadosh Baruch Hu, that's where it was given the Torah and the mitzvahs, which does not exist. In other words, the learning Torah is a mitzvah of learning Torah. The mitzvah of putting on tefillin, the mitzvah of putting on mezuzah, the mitzvah of all the 613 mitzvahs, it does not have in Gan Eden, from where the neshama descended from, and therefore it doesn't have the ability to fulfill Torah mitzvahs. Firstly, or namely, because it doesn't have a guf, you can't put on tefillin on a neshama. The Eibishter says, "Ukshartem leisal yodecha." The Torah was given in a world where there is a yad, where there is investment of soul in body. When the soul is divested from body in Elam Ha'elyon, it doesn't have a yad or a doorpost. Again, to put up mezuzah, it is precisely where there is a yad and there's a mezuzah and teitafes and the Beinei Necha. That's where HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the Torah. Hence, that's where the neshama is able, via Torah and mitzvahs, to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as opposed to the neshama, the way it's in Elam Ha'elyon. But here the Alter Rebbe, to be even more precise, the Alter Rebbe even contrasts the neshama's investment in Torah, learning Torah, doing mitzvahs, to the energy of the neshama itself. We said time and again, the neshama is a chelik elokamimal, is a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it itself, apparently, it's connected to the divine. So what does it need to Torah mitzvahs? So Alter Rebbe explains in this chapter that is precisely the neshama, as it connects to Torah mitzvah, that's when it connects to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with an absolute connection. Before, despite it's a chelik elokamimal, it's a part of God, yet it is not absolutely connected to God. And the difference of connected to God, or a feeling of God, or a somewhat connection to God from the perspective of the neshama to the perspective of connecting to God via doing a mitzvah, is be'ein arech. There's no comparison. And this is an explanation in this very chapter, which we began last week, and I would encourage everybody to just to have a more of appreciation of the Alter Rebbe's answer, to check out the previous class. Even we started already. It's the third class of Lamed Hey, even though the first class was very brief on Lamed Hey, on this chapter. But again, you can go to the Tanya link box, or to the link box, type in Tanya, you'll see the other classes, or, like we mentioned time and again, especially for newcomers, the tanyaonline.com website, where it's easy to access all the previous classes as well. One could follow the class with the text. So we're continue where we're holding with the Alter Rebbe's message. It was that in the end of the day, from the perspective of the neshama, it's about expressing itself, its own desires, even though spiritual desires. What is the desire in the neshama? What is the expression of the neshama? The emotional attachment with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I love HaKadosh Baruch Hu and I fear HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and so on, because that's what the neshama only loves and fears. It's no challenge for the neshama itself. From the perspective of the neshama doesn't want anything else, doesn't love anything else, doesn't fear anything else obvious other than God, because naturally so. It's a chelik elokamimal. It's a part of God. So it's a part of God. What else does a part of God want? Nothing else. Only God, with love and yir, rachmanis, with passion and so on, and an expression again, the tiferes, netzach chayd yisayid mal. These are the seven netzach chayd yisayid malchus, which correspond to the seven attributes which exist on high, where the neshama evolves from the way things are on high. The neshama evolves from the Eses Vedis Hakdeshes, like the Alter Rebbe explains in the third chapter of Tanya. So, and therefore the neshama's entire expression is towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yet the Alter Rebbe says that that's your expression, that's the neshama's expression, and to say. And when you're dealing with a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when we say Hashem Echad, or the connection to Hashem Echad, it's in the end of the day not about me, but about God. And again, we explain this more in the broader sense. If you remember, we quoted the Gemara says, when it comes to someone who is hari, has ego, a self-centered person, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I cannot live in the same domain. Famous Gemara Seita, which elaborates on this, and not dealing with somebody who lives, like we mentioned last week, not someone who lives a life of hefkerus, that God say, you tell me to do this, and I'll do opposite, which is again a demonstration of ego. But even somebody who learns Torah and does mitzvahs, but if it's about ego, it's about me. The idea of geus means to say it's about me. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I cannot live in the same domain. Because in the end of the day, it's all about you or about me. We brought the famous Pirush of the Baal Shem Tov on the pasuk of Ani Arisasar Ish Mistorim Ani Lo Yarenu. Depends where you put the positive. It's Vani, it's Lo Yarenu. If it's Vani Lo, then Yarenu. Again, we mentioned this. You could see it again in last week's class of this beautiful Torah of the Baal Shem Tov. But in the end of the day, Hashem says it's about you. I'm not there. And if it's about me, it has to be totally about me and not about you. And if you look in the Gemara about the Shminis, Sheminis, even the minimal gaiva, if you think about it, again, this is the reason why there's the machlekes. Someone says even Shminis, Sheminis, also not. There's again an opinion because even when the me, the I, is expressed subtly in the most delicate manner, in the end of the day, it's not about God. And with this, based on this, we were able a little bit easier to explain what Dr. Rebbe is saying over here. That even the neshama, which is a chelik l'kamimal, which is a part of God, but and therefore it only demonstrates its desire to God, or its willing, its motivation and its willing and its desire, its will rather, and its desire to cleave and connect to the Almighty. Via its love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and fear of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, again, of as well, and its reverence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and so on and so forth. But in the end of the day, it's its expression. And because of it's the neshama's expression, it's lacking, and there is a kind of an impossibility to truly, genuinely connect to the divine when it's about you, even it's a noble and godly expression. As opposed to when it comes to a mitzvah, that a mitzvah has nothing to do with me, nothing to do with the person, no thing at all. Nothing is nothing, no thing at all. It has nothing to do with the person. The Yid puts on tefillin only because HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to put on tefillin. There's nothing of the person's self involved. The person would never figure it out on his own. The neshama would have demonstrated its love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, similar to the neshamas, and again we mentioned even the neshamas, to malachim rather, to the angels, because they're in a godly environment, and therefore they constantly demonstrate their ava v'yira, like we say in davening, the love and fear of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the neshama, which is even greater and higher than the malach, as we know, the chelik l'kamimal, it's a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So its expression of love and fear, ultimately, or in its expression of love and fear, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu wouldn't tell it to put on tefillin, it wouldn't know how to put that, and wouldn't know that it needs to put on tefillin. So putting on tefillin, or any other mitzvah for that matter, any other mitzvah, we're just using the example of tefillin, is only because it's Pnimis Ritzayni, it's Hashem's Ratzon. Has nothing to do with the neshama itself. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kaviyachal, so to say, if the Eivishter wouldn't give the Torah, the neshama wouldn't put on tefillin. The neshama would have expressed its love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu because because that's it. That's the neshama itself. Masha Enkin, the Torah is only about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. To putting on tefillin is Pnimis Ritzayni, is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Ratzon. So when I put on tefillin, then I truly connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, the connection of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not just a bit more connected than the neshama itself on its own, being a chelik l'kamimal, part of God. It's not just a little bit more. It's be'ein areich more. There's no comparison, because that ultimately, even subtly, is about myself. And a mitzvah is solely about God. And in order to connect to God, it's connecting, engaging with something that it's only about God. And in the end of the day, this Beinani, with all its struggles, every single day it learns Torah, the Beinani learns Torah, the Yid learns Torah, every single day the Yid does a mitzvah. And because of that, that itself it becomes a basis for a comfort and a true consolation to the struggles, challenges, questions of the Beinoni, and the reason for him being in this world. So, again, we began this explanation. We began this in last week, and we are holding. We're holding Kehine Nishmas Adam, which is again about a third or quarter into the Pedic. You could see it in the corresponding English text as well. Kehine Nishmas Adam, the neshama of man. Afilu tzaddik gomor, even the neshama of man, is a complete tzaddik. Oived Hashem b'yira v'ava, that he serves HaKadosh Baruch Hu with fear and love, and not stam love but ava b'tanugim, that God and godliness becomes his sole pleasure. Now we want to make this clear. When we say someone's a Oived Hashem b'yira and ava, it's not a badge. It's not something which I like to talk myself in, that I'm a Oyev Hashem, I'm a Yorei Hashem. We're talking about true yira. Needless to mention, even though it can be erroneously presented, and the notion of a Yorei Hashem and a Oyev Hashem, we're talking, and the message can remain sometimes again misunderstood or mistranslated. It's not Yorei Hashem. It's not an external expression. People are fakvetched and they call themselves Yorei Hashem, or they have Oyev Hashem, and so on and so forth. Yiras Hashem is somebody who has fear of God like he fears anything else, which demands fear or reverence. Pashit, it felt in his heart a true yira, a true tangible fear, a feeling of total expression of fear and reverence towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which comes from an important appreciation and a comprehensive understanding on the reality of Elokus. And here it's even deeper, because you're dealing with a neshama, which a neshama is chelik lekamimal, a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The yid lives a yid of a true tzaddik, not a tzaddik because it says in the newspaper he's a tzaddik, a true tzaddik, that he didn't allow anything to obscure the eir nishmase, the light of his neshama. Hence, his fear is a genuine fear, his love is a genuine love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He loves HaKadosh Baruch Hu like someone would love, like the famous lashon of the Rambam. He's lovesick to another party. It's a true ava to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and this ava's bitanugim becomes his sole pleasure, not only a drive but a pleasure. I'm saying this very briefly. In chapter Yud, the 10th chapter, spoke about the difference of the ava as a kirish be'esh, like a fiery, loving fire to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but that's more the drive to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he says there's a higher level, that it's ava b'tanugim. He arrives already at the place, at the experience, which is more of a calm experience, yet very profound. It's an ava of tainug, of pleasure. And he has a pleasurely love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a love completely a love which completely the love is completely entrenched with pleasure in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yet, even though this individual, again, he's a tzaddik gomor with his yira v'ava, afal pikein eino pteila b'metzias ligamri libatul u'lecholel ba'eir Hashem mamash li'izlachodim u'miyochodim b'yichud gomor. Nonetheless, it's not completely annulled in the face of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, means to say it's not batel, it's not completely submitted, or it's not completely doesn't stand with an absolute subordination towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to become completely absorbed and become to completely annul in the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to become one, completely one. Again, as we use the term, an absolute connection, become absolutely one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because in the end of the day, Dover B'fnei Atzmei, he is a Dover, he is an entity on his own, Yorei Hashem v'ayavai, he's a God-fearing person and a God-loving person. In the end of the day, it's an expression of his love, an expression of his fear. And because, even subtly, and here it's more than subtly, because what does he want? He wants God. What does he fear? He fears God. It's all an expression of a parent's submission to the Almighty, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yet, it's about his expression. If it's about his expression, he's a Dover B'fnei Atzmei. He's an entity on his own. There is him. There is some type of self involved, and if it's self, it's not HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it's certainly not La'achodim u'miyuchodim yichud gomer. It's certainly not a complete unity and oneness with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Masha einkin ha-mitzvahs ma'asim tovim, as opposed to the mitzvahs and the good deeds which a Yid is commanded to do in Elam Haza, which is the mandate of a Yid in Elam Haza, which they are Ritzeini Yisbarech, they are the Ratzin of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and solely it's about the God's will. There's nothing of me involved. And Ritzeini Yisbarech Hu Mokir HaChaim L'chol Olam Mizbah B'ruim, and the Ratzin of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's the source of all life and energy, which descends and becomes manifest in all worlds and all creations. And without the mitzvah, the ratzin, the energy itself, ultimately is concealed and contracted in a way that, as it reveals itself to the Olam, is to all the worlds and to all of creation, is in a concealed manner. V'yiridas hamadreges at sheyuchol lishavas libaros yesh me'ayin v'davar nifred b'fnei atzmei v'lo yivatel mitzvahs kenal mashen ken hamitzvahs shen pnimis ritzeini yisbarech ve'ein sham hester panim klal ein hachayis shebahem davar nifred b'fnei atzmei klal elo miyuchod v'nichlal b'ritzeini yisbarech v'yilachodim mamash b'yichud gomer. So yes, we read a few lines, but we're going to try to explain this over here, and perhaps maybe we'll read the text again just to understand what Dr. Rebbe is saying. Is to understand that the if you look at everything, like in other words, like this, someone's going to say the following. One can argue and say, what is a mitzvah? A mitzvah is the ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, take anything else within creation. Take, for example, the table. This table, how does it come to be? Hashem wanted it to be, and that's why it is. Vedic Pasuk, and we can only understand that if HaKadosh Baruch Hu would not want this table to come into existence, the table will not come into existence. So why is it here? Because Hashem desires it to be here. And again, there's a pasuk in Koila shechafetz Hashem masa. If you look at even Elam Hasiyah, this physical world, it comes from Chafetz Hashem. It comes from the Chav Chayfetz, the desire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And again, you need not to explain this pasuk. It becomes so obvious. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu would not want this table to exist and be, would it be? Answer is no. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants it to be. That's what it's there. So if you think about anything else within Elam Hazah, in ultimately being part or sitting by a table, apparently should have the same virtue as putting on tefillin. Because what is tefillin? How would you define tefillin? Tefillin is a mitzvah. Another definition for tefillin, it's a Ratzin Hashem, which is again in common in a common name to every mitzvah, that it's a mitzvah, it's a command from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu command it? Because He wants it, He desires it. Hashem says, I want you to put on tefillin. I want you to do this in this mitzvah. I want you to light the Shabbos candles. I want you to put up a mezuzah. It's I want, that becomes the Ratzin Hashem, which ultimately compels us to do this action. The mitzvah. So the question is, what is the difference between me sitting by a table or engaging with it? In other words, sitting by the table, appreciating the table and putting on tefillin. Is that the table as well? Chafetz Hashem, it's the Ratzon Hashem, it's also what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted. And as we just said, it's so it's understood in the most, just on such a basic and elemental manner. It is so simple. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu would not want it, it would not exist. So if it exists, Hashem wants it. And if Hashem wants it, give me another word for Hashem wants it, Ratzein Hashem. It's the desire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What is tefillin? Tefillin is about Ratzein Hashem. So what's the difference of me sitting by a table and appreciating the table and me putting on tefillin? But the answer is obvious. Because the way the Ratzein Hashem becomes manifest in this table, it is through many, many tzimtzumim, many concealments, and many contractions of the Eir of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And till the light the energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu will trickle through and ultimately create this table. Because the way all Eilumis were created, for that matter, we mentioned a number of times that even Gan Eden is a great concealment of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The mere fact it's called an Eilam Haba, it's called a world, and the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, obviously, if you want to describe HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he's certainly not an Eilam. For that matter, Hashem is beyond any description. Certainly not an Eilam. Hashem is not a world, even a world which demonstrates his own reality, but in the end of the day, it comes in the package, in the format of a world, and a world, by definition, is certainly not HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu cannot be defined by Olam Haba. Olam also, the world Olam, as we mentioned before, when it comes to Olam as Tacht and this physical world, we mentioned that by definition of the word Olam demonstrates, the definition of Olam demonstrates the Hel and the Hester, the concealment of the reality of God. And that is a common denominator within every Eilam, because Eilam Haba is also called Eilam, and Eilam by definition is a Hel and Hester, concealment of the godly reality. Even though Eilam Haba is a world which demonstrates the godly reality. They have a no from the ray of the Shechina. But yet, Chas v'Shalom, to define HaKadosh Baruch Hu as Eilam Haba, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is beyond the Eilam, beyond any description. So the only thing is, in this very physical world, the Hel and the Hester is much greater. So when we say the Hel and the Hester is much greater from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to ultimately create a table, which is the table by definition, or any bria, any created entity. If you look at the created being, the created entity, in the face of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that you cannot think of anything of two more opposite realities, more opposite than creator and creation, from every perspective and point of view, especially when it comes to Eilam Hazeh Gashmi, this physical world. All the rules which exist by God don't exist within creation, and vice versa. All the rules which exist within creation certainly don't exist by God. So how does HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how does HaKadosh Baruch Hu create this world, or how does this world ultimately emanate or evolve from HaKadosh Baruch Hu? And the answer comes through the great tzimtzum, many concealments. So when we say the rules are so opposite, we can go on and on, but the simple example, or it becomes so obvious when you talk about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is infinite. This world is a finite world. HaKadosh Baruch Hu transcends time and place. This world is all about time and place, the confinement of time and place. Hagbalas, borders, definitions, descriptions, limitations. This is all the makeup of every item and every idea an Eilam has in this physical world. For that matter, again, exists in the spiritual, but there it's more spiritual. But to understand the stark difference, where does it become the stark difference between Bayrei and Nivra? You see it in this very physical world. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is everything other than that, opposite than that, beyond description, infinite, no hagbal, limitless, beyond definition, beyond description, and so on and so forth. So how do you have a table, for example, a table which is a gashmi, a tangible table which its rules are just the opposite of the rules of its own creator? And we say HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't just create it in the Sheshis Mebereshis, in the 6 days of creation, which even then it would be a question, how does an infinite God create a finite world? How does an infinite God create a finite table? But even now it's even more so. We say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu continues to create this world every single moment, every single second. So this very table is receiving its energy from an infinite God, and it remains finite in the most finite manner possible. It has a certain amount of feet and a certain amount of measurement, and it's tangible and so on. It's gashmius and so on and so forth. And the answer is this comes through tzimtzum. Tzimtzum, as explained in a number of svarim, is the complete contraction and concealment of the entire infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, infinite energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and not one tzimtzum, but tzimtzumim ein kates, infinite amounts of tzimtzumim. Again, we have to understand this whole parsha called tzimtzumim, but just to and explain many places, Zayir in Kabbalah and Chassidus explains it again thoroughly, which you can see the different Maimorim and discourses which deal with it, which speak about it, which again we can appreciate it and thoroughly understand it as well to a great degree. To a great degree, even the whole notion of tzimtzum is beyond our understanding, because it's not just about concealing a bit of the light, because when you're dealing with concealing a bit of the light, in the end of the day, when you're talking about infinity, especially infinity, the way it's associated with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Bli Gvul, everything would ultimately also be created in an infinite manner. Even you cover up more and more of the light. There had to be something, because you're dealing with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Ein Sof, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Bli Gvul. So in order something mugbal, limited, to come from the Bli Gvul HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it just couldn't be another cover-up, another cover-up, another cover. It had to be true tzimtzum, which means HaKadosh Baruch Hu completely removing, as Eiri HaBilti Bal Gvul Al Atzad, as the Lashon in Eitz Chaim, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu removed his Eiri HaBilti Bal Gvul, and eventually tzimtzum, achat tzimtzum, la'en kates, and of tzimtzumim, of Beirei, of Nivra, till this Nivra could have come the way it is. For example, when we say, they give an example on this very table. So you think about what is the connection to the table of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Certainly, Kel Asher Chavetz Hashem Asa, that the whole reason why the table is because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants it to be. But the wanting, the way the Rotzein of HaKadosh, the wanting, the cap, the way the wanting it of HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the highest levels, till it evolves, till it manifests into a physical table, there is infinite amount of cover-ups and concealments from the way it begins in Chafetz Hashem till it manifests as a table. So when you're sitting next to the table, even though HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the only reason why the table is there because of Ratzein Hashem, Kol Asher Chafetz Hashem also, but you're here with the table itself, the way the table is after these many tzimtzumim. So you're going to say, I'm sitting by the table, I'm in contact, I'm in touch with my Creator. It's a narishkeit. Because by the time the table becomes a table, there's the total concealment of Beirei, of Nivra, of the Creator, from its creation. Now, ultimately, we are told that our mandate is to pull away all these tzimtzumim, to demonstrate, to understand, firstly in our mind, to appreciate. That in the end of the day, it's to find the godly reality within creation. And when we find the godly reality within creation, we remove all these tzimtzumim, and eventually we can connect. But this is the ultimate purpose, to in our minds, in our appreciation, to remove these tzimtzumim, to understand at the end of the day, it's only about the Einid Mavadi, the godly reality which continues to vivify Elam Haza. We look at the table different. The table becomes a different table. The famous expression of there's many tzaddikim. I believe it was the Rebbe Marash. He once said towards the end of his life, he says, he told his Talmidim, you see, it was a Shabbos table. Say, you see table, or you see the fish, or something. He said, I see the Dvar Hashem Hamahava Mechayim Etkayim, this fish. I see the godly energy which is giving it light. He simply didn't see the piece of fish as we all see. Look at the piece of fish. Or similar to the table or the Elam Hazard. The idea is to take away all these layers and to connect the Beirei and the Nivra, to introduce the Creator within creation. Now that comes through much Avodah, through much service. By the way, we don't need it, even though that's an extreme example or a unique example of a tzaddik or many tzaddikim, but we see so many times within ourselves that we look at the same Olam, we could look at it differently depending where we're holding in our Avodas Hashem. You need not look too far. Look at Adam HaRishon prior to sin and after the sin. He was in the same world. The world looked different after sin. He himself, as the Torah that identifies, Torah clearly rather, it describes Adam HaRishon's. Adam HaRishon prior to sin, he didn't even know he wasn't wearing clothes. After Vayis Beishoshu, the world looked different. So we ourselves could look at the world in different ways. It depends what we're holding in Avodas Hashem. But again, this is the ultimate service and the ultimate purpose. But when we exercise much in Avodas Hashem, we could find the godliness. Now that we take away the layers of tzimtzumim, we can find the godliness within creation. We ought to, and that's the ultimate purpose of Nisav HaKadosh Baruch Hu Lislei Dir V'Tachtenim. Hashem wants us to make this very physical world a home for His presence, for His divine presence, which means finding and revealing the Beirei and the Nivra, the Creator within creation. But yet we don't start like that. because when you come to Elam Haza, the mere creation of Elam Haza is rochik, it's distant from its creator. In other words, the fabric of Elam Haza itself, when you want to connect it to the Chafetz Hashem Asa, it went through so many tzimtzumim after tzimtzumim till the table or any other creation came into being. So I can't say I'm sitting and I'm dealing with creation and therefore I'm close to creator. You're not. Because there is the distance of beta, and we can't think of any diametric difference between two entities as HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the beta, the creator from creation on its own. Chafetz Hashem Asa, but Chafetz is the first cap, is the way from the perspective of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, until it manifested to a table. There is Ein Kates, an infinite amount of these concealments and tzimtzumim again till the table was created. As opposed to when you're dealing with a mitzvah, dare we say this is Ratzon Elyon, this is Ratzon Elyon, this is Ratzon HaElyon, this is the supreme desire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as it is the full manifestation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's desire, as it is from the perspective of Ratzon, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the desire, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will, as we say it in many times, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu and His Ratzon are essentially one, which again is even more than the way it is in the human being, that me and my desire not necessarily is very close, it's a toyas hanefesh, it's very close, it's an expression of my soul, but yet me and you cannot virtually say, you cannot rather absolutely say that me and my desire are one. By Kodesh Baruch Hu Ritzonei Echad. Again, even by the human being, we can appreciate when I want something, it's an expression of my nefesh, my soul. It's not a particular expression. It's not a specific expression. It's the whole drive in which my nefesh is driven to something. But by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's even more. So when we say HaKadosh Baruch Hu Reitze, He wants the Yid to put on tefillin. When I take the tefillin, I put on the tefillin, I'm connecting to the Ratzon, to the absolute Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which Hu Ritzonei Echad. HaKadosh Baruch Hu in His Ratzon is one, meaning to say when I put on the tefillin, I'm touching the divine, I'm connecting the divine with an absolute connection. And that comes only through Kiyum Mitzvahs. So just not to go off topic, certainly when this is, and therefore this has to always be the beginning point, or this is why we came down to this world, to be Mekayim Ratzon HaElyon, there's no concealments. Because it's the Ratzon exactly the way the Eibishter wanted. The Eibishter wanted that the tefillin box should go on this part of the hand, and the Ritzuas, and the head, the tefillin, the tefillin on the sharash should go to this particular spot. The moment I do it, I'm connected to the Chafetz Hashem, I'm connected to the Ratzon Hashem as it is. Which means I'm connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as He is, for Himself, by Himself. There's no tzimtzumim, there's no concealment, because this is the Ratzon HaElyon. This is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Pnimis Ritzonei, the core essence of Hashem's Ratzon. So again, not to go off, obviously, in the end of the day, through the mitzvahs, we're able to take away the layers of tzimtzum which exist within this element, to reveal godliness even within the table. Starting from utilizing the table as it in a way that it would contribute to my performance of Torah mitzvahs, and simply to put the sefer down, or the table becomes a table which I'm able to say Advar Torah, or able to eat through the Shabbos and so on. So ultimately, the point is to bring the Pnimis Ritzonei which exists in mitzvahs, ultimately to bring it into Elam Hazeh, to introduce to Elam Hazeh itself, into the physical. In this physical creation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to introduce the Eined Mavad, to introduce the godly reality again from within, and again within the Elam itself. But that is as an extension, by extension of my keeping Torah mitzvahs. And it's only by extension of keeping Torah mitzvahs. But again, not to go into it, there's a davar, a movement of Pasha, it's understood. But not investment in Elam on its own, but because I'm so connected to Torah via learning, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, via learning His Torah and doing His Pnimis Ritzonei, the way the Ratzon is, as it is, without any cover-ups. By extension, I could take that Ratzon HaElyon and try to start chiseling into the Elam itself and demonstrating with an Elam, or utilizing the Elam itself for its ultimate godly purpose, or introducing the godly reality to in Elam. Ultimately, the entire world, not only the mitzvahs, become part of this Dira B'Tachteinu, dwelling place for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but the entire world becomes a dwelling place for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem l'melech al kol ha'aretz, u'malach ha'aretz de'as Hashem. The entire land, the texture of the land is filled with with the knowledge of a Kodesh Baruch Hu, but by extension of my exercising on a constant basis, my Kima Teda mitzvahs. So in this, my connection to Kodesh Baruch Hu via the mitzvah, via learning Torah, doing the mitzvah, which in this, again, in these few words, the Alter Rebbe contrasts the Eilam itself, which also is Ratzon HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but yet it's the way that Kodesh Baruch Hu's Ratzon comes down through many tzimtzumim. Hence, when you're dealing with Eilam Hazat, there's no, on the surface, there's no connection to Creator, as opposed to when I do a mitzvah, this is the mitzvah, this is the Ratzon Hashem, the way it is, the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu innerly wants this mitzvah to be fulfilled as such, as such that he becomes one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In contrast to the Tzaddik Gomor's expression, or the Yid's expression, even if it's as a Tzaddik Gomor, with the absolute love and the absolute fear, absolute expression of fear and love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because in the end of the day that's about me, even subtly, as opposed to a mitzvah is totally about God. And if I perform the mitzvah, and the only way again to perform the mitzvah is the neshama coming down in this physical world. And that's where HaKadosh Baruch Hu told us to fulfill his mitzvahs, which means HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, tefillin. Again, we're using tefillin as for that, but that matter. Every single mitzvah, we're using tefillin as one example. Tefillin is one example. Hashem says, put on the tefillin on your hand. You need a hand to put on tefillin. So the neshama comes down into this world, puts on tefillin. At that point, it's connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a way that it could never connect before, even the way the neshama was prior to that in Gan Eden. Because then it expressed its Abba, its Yiro, or even when the neshama is in the body, it can't just be enough of it. It's not enough the fact that the neshama is a chelik kamimal. It's part of God, hence, because it's a part of God, it naturally expresses its love, its true, genuine love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, its fear and reverence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But yet, ultimately, that's expressing it for itself, as opposed to a mitzvah, is only about God. Have a great night.